Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's special selection comes at us from Juan. Tell me what you felt listening to the outro. But anyways, hope you enjoy this piece. Cheers from Chile. Keep it up with the great content. Well, thanks, Juan. I will. And I'll also give a little bit of extra attention to Disillusion's outro here. The song is The Sleep of Restless Hours. It is 17 minutes long. And I'll try to focus a little bit on that and let you know what it made me feel. Interestingly, when I saw this album art, I immediately remembered the band. We checked out a song called Back to the Times of Splendor, but that was actually over a year ago. It was the tail end of 2020, so I don't actually remember anything about the band itself, but for some reason, this sandy, orangey album art caught my attention, and like I said, it immediately clicked when I saw it. I was like, we've checked something out from this album before. Alright, so let's get into this. Disillusion's The Sleep of Restless Hours. Interesting. Really great use of the sound sphere, lots of ornamental ideas sitting around. Shifted into this unified front wall of sound idea. We have a dyad between the two guitars. I like that little cymbal hit. Bringing in that power with the strings. Actually, I don't think that's strings now. I think that's just a different guitar timbre. Okay, yeah. I really like the way that that left hand upper range guitar foreshadowed moving into that last section, and then the right hand guitar went to that same range. Really cool. we had a little bit of a push and pull thing going on with the first half of the frame. Yeah. Ooh. Is this a different vocalist? Yeah. Got the texture layering there between the guitar and vocals. Interesting juxtaposing idea there. A very Rush triplet feel there. The production is interestingly a little muddy. I really prefer moments like this where we have a separation of ideas. Yeah. Yeah, really great way to bring it back, utilizing the rim hits. All muted guitar work, like everything has really been pulled back a bit. Ooh. So I was trying to figure out why those rim hits or cross sticks hits were felt odd, and I think it's because we're in 6/8 and the cross stick is providing polyrhythm of 4/4. 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Yeah. See, and the symbol in the left is hammering home. That's 6. But the cross stick is laying down a 4. Yeah, okay. We do have some strings here, finally. Really interesting counterpoint with that left guitar playing against the vocals. And the strings are providing layering against the vocal, or with the vocals. Another situation where I don't know if it's because of the galloping nature, where it feels like they're playing 1 and 3 out of a triplet, or if it's just raw rushing, but it felt like that section was just pushing a little hard against the tempo. I feel like it was mostly coming from the vocalist. But it could have just been a real playful element of the tempo, because I don't think the rest of the band was pushing it either. I think it was really just the vocalist. They might have just been bending it a little bit to achieve a specific vibe. Another triplet idea within a 4/4. I think that's the second time we've heard this, and it's related to the polyrhythmic 6/4 we heard earlier. Interesting transition into this. Very visually interesting. And a massive tempo shift, the double bass kicks to real heaviness, a lack of ornamentation. counterpoint. Everyone's playing the same thing. The symbol is telling us we're in 6. But the snare and bass are telling us we're in 4, so that's happening again. Yeah, we got snare hits on 1 and 3. It's weird because the bass kicks keep shifting between triplet feels and straight 8s. I'm really digging these layers in the melody as well. We're getting some nice counterpoint finally and some melodic harmonization. I think there's 3 very similar counterpoints, or 3 very similar melodies going on. This centered guitar, though, feels very muffled, like there's a bag over the amp or something. Like, compare the center guitar to this left one. Very clear, very vibrant. All right. So, as with most lengthy songs, this one we're looking at 17 minutes, it's going to be a bit more of a surface read during the analysis, just because there's so much music to take in. It's more difficult to remember each individual section and to dive into the nitty-gritty of them, rather than kind of talk about the song as a whole. Juan did originally ask me to provide some context, or some context about the ending of the track, what I felt about it. I think it did a good job at creating the idea of entering into something larger than life, maybe something forgotten to time. We had that really interesting dissonant washing over. I think I even physically winced when it happened. It was like going through a cave and finding a secret a door that no one's opened, and you like have the one key to open it, and it opens, and inside is like a civilization that shouldn't exist, right? And even though you're under all these caverns, there's a sun in here and it's bright. And being in the caves, your eyes have adjusted to the darkness, but then this light washes over you, and it's just like, ugh, your eyes are trying to adjust. You're not expecting it. Mentally, it's not really working with your surroundings. You don't understand how this can exist. Your eyes aren't used to this. Your brain can't wrap its mind around it. And it's just, that's what that felt like. And then there was that the grand piano came in with like this bass rumbling sound, and then we moved into the metal section where everything started unified, and then we added lines and lines and lines on top of it, which led into the fade out. It was like I said, just the introduction of it, the dissonant tones rising in volume and fading away, kind of felt like being washed over by a bright light, adjusting to it, realizing the scope of what you're witnessing, which is that bass tone, the song coming in, the foundation of this section coming in, which is just like finally grasping what you're looking at, and then the exploring part, which is just like each of these layers add up as you realize just how big of a deal this is that you found. That's what the ending of the song felt like to me. It was it was uncovering something lost to time, some grand discovery that maybe even shouldn't have been found, but was anyways. And sort of just coming to terms with what you're discovering. Um, and you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be like this subterranean civilization. Uh, that's just kind of where my brain went with that. But you know, just any sort of discovery that's kind of mind blowing in its own right, that has, you know, possibly far reaching consequences and changes to society as we know it, if what we have found is true. You know, if the discoveries were ever released out into the public knowledge, like what would happen if we discovered Atlantis kind of vibe, or you know, some sort of actual you know, device that can't be explained by science, maybe something supernatural or you know, religious that actually has connotations for a religion being true rather than being completely faith based, which is how they are right now. Um, you know, something that just totally warps the mind of culture as we know it. That's kind of what the ending of the song felt like to me. And I don't know if I can necessarily describe it when we get into the music in a way that lives up to that description, but that's what it felt like to me. And I think a lot of that ties into the transition into that moment. I think without that, it would not have had the same effect. But I really love that dissonant tone into the piano, which I don't think we have heard up to that point anyways. It was a brand new timbre that really introduced this low rumbling, um, and that went into just the way that the ending was created. It took a lot of the ideas we had heard previously in the song, the unified sections, the sections with tons of embellishment, counterpoint, duality of time signature, or at least of duality of rhythms, and brought all of that together into an ever evolving piece that just kept getting bigger and larger the more that it went on. And yeah, I think that all just comes together. I'm kind of curious if you know, if you want to put in the comments here how you interpret that section or what it means to you. I'm going to wager it has a specific emotional value to you since you asked specifically about my experience with it. I'm curious. And you know that I extend that to everybody as well. You know, if you have a specific read or if that ending really made you feel something that the rest of the song didn't, let me know. You know, I'm always interested in how other people experience music. You know, I say it all the time. I don't think I'll ever stop saying it. I'm just a dude on the internet giving my opinions and my experiences with music. I am not an authority, and I enjoy hearing about other people's experience just as much as I enjoy telling you about mine. So, with that bit out of the way, what is the song doing? And it's doing a lot of things. It dances between a few different ideas, and I think the two that I want to focus on that I think we see primarily throughout the track are the unified sections and the uh, ornamental sections, I think we'll call them. And the song sort of bounces back and forth between those two. It starts out in the ornamental idea where we hear many layers, right? We have our drums coming in, bass, multiple guitars. There's two, maybe three guitars at times. I heard a string once, but I wasn't really sure about it. But there were definitely strings at the end, so maybe I did hear strings at the beginning. It could have just been another guitar timbre, so maybe four guitars at a time. We have a couple of different vocal styles in here, and we have some ornamental ideas that sort of sit outside of the main roles of foundational stuff, atmosphere and chord, and melodic stuff. Um, and it's really the way that all of this gets built up that creates this section, or creates a division between this section and what we hear in the more unified driven sections. So in these ornamental sections, we typically have a foundational aspect. We're going to have a chord progression maybe, or an atmospheric section. Maybe it's a guitar riff, and we're going to have some bass work that might go along with it, might do its own thing. And basically from here we add the melody in the vocals. We have the drums in the background, usually doing some variation between or some combination between playing the time signatures in some situations. I'm going to add that S, and just playing neat melodic ideas that don't necessarily go along with the that don't play along with that idea of being a human metronome, but might play along with the rhythms that we find in the bass or the guitars, or just adding their own rhythmic aspect to the song. And then we have the ornamental ideas, which are just these, I guess you could call them licks or riffs that kind of exist above or even outside some of these core ideas. If you just want the chord progression and the rhythm and the melody, you can listen to the main guitar, bass, drums, and vocalist and be pretty good. But there's other ideas, maybe they're textural layering, where we'll take the idea that the guitar is doing and just play it on a different instrument, or play it on a different guitar timbre, or play it an octave up, which I guess technically is a harmonic layering because we are providing harmony, but it's the same note, it's just an octave higher. So it really depends on your stance there. I tend to see octave harmonies more as a textural thing than a harmonic device, since it is technically the same note. But occasionally we also will get harmonic layering as well, where we get dyads being played, which was something I mentioned early on as well, where the left and right pan guitar were playing the same rhythm, and they were changing notes at the same time, but they would not necessarily always play the same distance of notes. So they might start like this, and then they'll just kind of jump around and change the distance that they are, and the distances between two notes are going to dictate the emotion of that dyad. A dyad is just two notes being played at once. So we have this really nice emotional flow. This is different than playing the same distance all the time and the two notes moving together through an idea, which is going to retain the same emotional aspect throughout the entire phrase. And aside from this, we also have rhythmic layering, which is something that popped up here quite a few times, which could be polyrhythmic or polymetric. And they're both very similar ideas. It's easy to get them confused, but we experienced both of them in here. Polyrhythm is when you have two different rhythms that both exist within a single bar. Polymetric is when you have two meters, which means that the phrasing between ideas is going to be, could be different between the two time signatures. So one case of that would be 3 against 2, which would give us a triplet feel, which is a triplet feel in one half and a dual feel in the other half, and it would be. So they both start on the same one. This one only gets 2 hits per bar, this one gets 3 hits per bar, but at the end of the bar they line right back up. Right? So that's polyrhythmic. It exists within the same bar, in the same time signature. We just have a variety of rhythms within here. And we saw a lot of that with the triplet feel inside of 4/4, and I pointed that out a few times. Polymetric is when we have multiple time signatures existing at the same time. And this is something we saw just once. It was in the slower section when we hit the cross sticks, the cross stick part, and the palm muted in the guitars, and we just really brought the energy down. And this is a really interesting section. And here we had the cross stick was doing 4/4, and the Everything else was introducing a 6/8 vibe. Very cool section. I really enjoyed that. So yeah, just various ways that we can add embellishing ideas on top of the very standard foundational stuff. And these ideas were presented in quite a few sections of the track, where we had a more foundational aspect and we had these various types of ideas layering on top of it to create something that felt very full and singular. Well, I should say filled with singular ideas, where each instrument would have their own role and task within the overall sound. Now, these were contrasted with the more unified hard rock sections, or heavy rock. I don't know what you would call them. I'm so bad with these genre ideas, where everybody just kind of comes together for a unified sound. The guitars, the bass, the drums, they're all doing the same rhythm. The guitars and bass are all playing the same notes or chords. The bass is usually doing something along the lines of, playing the pedal tones, the tonic notes of the chords that the guitars are playing. And we just have these really unified sections where everything comes together and feels very wall of sound like. It is stark contrast to the very wide and orchestrated feel of the ornamental section. And the song really does bounce back and forth between both of these. Interestingly, these are not dictated by sound. We had heavy ornamental sections and we had heavy unified sections. We had quieter ornamented sections, and we had some tamer, quieter, unified sections as well. It's not like one section was only utilized for a specific emotion. I mean, even right off the bat, we can see that the opening section, which was ornamental, featured those growls. But later on, we get to the quieter cross-sticking section, very ornamental, very orchestrated, and also a very quiet section of the track. I mentioned that the ending was a combination of everything in the track, and we start out with after we get past the transition into it, we start out with a very unified idea. We lay down the foundation, and then we begin to add more and more. In the first couple of layers, we're not really doing much that was different. We might have been adding a timbre or adding a harmony, but for the most part, everybody was still unified on an idea. It really wasn't until the third or fourth guitar layer when we began to hear variations or brand new melodies being introduced that contrasted that foundational idea and began to turn it into an ornamental section of the song. And it was this nice gradual growth from from one style of the song into the other, and I think it was rather natural. And if you weren't paying attention, you might not have even noticed that it was sort of a way to showcase both sides, rather instead of being two different styles, to show how one can grow into the other. I thought that was a really great way to just bring together the two sides of the song that mostly were just either or. We were in one style or in another, and to allow it all just to kind of bleed together into a singular idea. I thought they did a fantastic job doing that. I do want to bring up the vocals. Just real quick, I was a little worried about them. Because I wasn't a huge fan of the growls when they came in, and by the end of the song, I'm still not a huge fan of them, but I think they worked well in context of everything around it. I was delighted to hear that clean vocal, and I even asked during the song, is this the same vocalist? I'm still not sure, and that's an answer for the comments. Let me know if they have a second vocalist in here, but I was delightful. It was a delightful surprise to find that they were going to play around with both of these and not just, again, keep them segmented as this is the heavy bit, this is the quiet bit, but utilize them in different contexts as well as harmonizing them together at different points in time where we got both styles. I really enjoyed that, and once again, it's just another element of how strong their aspects of layering are. They know exactly when their song needs to be a unified wall of sound and when they need to add layers and how they should add them. They don't just blindly add harmonies and call it a day. They say, how should we layer this? Should it be a textural thing? Should it be an atmospheric thing? Should we harmonize it? And I think it's really interesting how they go about doing that because it crafts a specific flow to a lot of the way that the song works. I have a couple more ideas I want to talk about before we get into the lyrics. The first is that quiet part with the cross stick where we had the polymeter. I thought this was a really nice transition into it. And while it didn't stick around for too long, I thought it was an interesting way to not only contrast the heaviness that existed up until that point, but to also showcase a wider view of what the song was doing. The opening was very heavy, and when we kind of pulled back the growls for some cleaner vocals, we also kind of entered into what, at least to me, felt a little bit softer, right? And we kind of had this idea of like heavy versus lighter music in this track. But I think what was interesting was here is that it felt like these larger dips, and then when this soft section came in, it's like you zoom out of the graph and you're like, actually, we were just kind of up here and the song actually comes down here. Like there's a massive intensity loss into this section. And what you thought was actually larger differences between those two were actually pretty much the same thing in the larger scope of things. And it's a really great way to sort of, like I said, pull the camera back and allow you to see the larger picture instead of focusing on something smaller. It also allowed for more of an intimate sort of jazzy style of layering that we didn't get to see earlier, because a lot of the ornamental stuff we had seen up to this point was with these big heavy electric guitar sounds. So a lot of it did kind of get muddied up a little bit, and here we got to move on to some cleaner guitar sounds. We got to move to some palm muting to allow us to have less of a muddy overall tone to it all, and we can really hear the differentiation between each of these instruments. And we're going to get into production in a second because I do have a little bit to say about that, and the muddiness is a thing about it. But yeah, just having a moment to hear all of these sounds with clarity, a strong amount of clarity, because we've removed a lot of the distortion from them, a lot of the compression. And we're getting some more cleaner tones out of these instruments. And if not a cleaner tone, then just less reverberation out of the playing itself, which kind of cleans up some of the low end. And I just think it's really interesting because, everything else, it was a little muddy, but it was also done for the effect, right? You need all the distortion, you need all that overdrive, it gives it the rock strength. So I understand you can't necessarily always have a hyper clean production with this kind of heavy music, but it's really nice for them to strip it back a little bit and allow me to hear their composition style without all of the effects of rock and metalness on top of it, and really get to hear the underlying music and how they might go about composing a piece with the strong clarity of something close to acoustic instruments. I really love that section. Plus, just talking about flow, we have these areas up here, and we finally dip down and enter this. And we don't just stay in here and gradually build up to the next big moment, which I think is what a lot of prog bands would do in a section like this. But we had this really nice flow coming back up out of it. We'd enter some heavier sections and then back it down a little bit, and then bring it back up and back it down a little bit. And it's just really nice tension and de-escalation, and tension and de-escalation that very steadily brought us back up to the high point. Just absolutely loved that. The other thing I really want to focus on real quick before we get into production and lyrics is going to be that silence. Okay, so I had mentioned that the ending I felt was a little special because of how we transitioned into it. Because we had those dissonant tones, because we had the piano show up with those low bass notes, because of how we built into it. But I completely forgot that it was also complete silence almost coming into this section for at least half a minute, maybe longer. Just a really gutsy idea. I think there was also like a light motif that we heard before we got into that washing over of the dissonant tones. But yeah, the song abruptly ends like 12 minutes in, about 5 minutes to go, and just kind of sits in silence for a little bit before you kind of hear the beginnings of a piano line or something, maybe a violin, just something real soft coming back in, fading back in, and just the confidence to stop a song short, have that very harsh transition to silence, and then take your time getting back to the meat of it. And it really is necessary. It's a contrast. It's a moment to catch your breath, and it's also a moment of wonder, which ties in very well to discovering something that is mind blowing, that could, change the way culture is and the way that we live. There's going to be this finding of something wondrous. And I mentioned that a lot of that wonder in that transition, but I completely forgot about the wonder here. It is silent and I don't know what's going on. There's a melody line, we're fading into something, but why did the song stop? Why are we doing this fade in? Why does this feel like another song entirely? And it's this section that just forces me to ask questions, which puts me in that wondrous mindset, which leads very well into that dissonant tone washing over me and the bass on the piano coming in to signify something very large and weighty, into this big moment. Like, it was just a beautiful way to transition into it, every aspect of it. And it's one of those times where the effect is definitely something that needs to be heard, not something that you can just see on paper, right? I've talked about many times in the past that I'm a fan of smooth transitions, that harsh transitions really need to have a reason to be there, at least for me. Again, just my opinions here. But for me, this section just really works. We have that hard cutoff and it creates this curiosity. At first, I thought maybe the song was over, but I looked at the time that I was recording and I was like, by my count, we still should have, 3 or 4 more minutes left. And, it puts me in that inquisitive mindset, which just really works well for storytelling of what, went into that next section. But, if you just told me the song ends abruptly and then a new song begins, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to check that out. I'm kind of turned off by that. But, when you hear it in practice, so good. Absolutely love that. Final note is the production. And I don't remember, like I said, we checked out Disillusion like a year and a half ago. So I don't really remember. Well, even if I was talking about production at the time, I know that's sort of a newer topic for me to be analyzing. I also see this was released in '04. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, we're going to go with '04 on that. Um, so again, production is going to be very different. But I feel like with this song, especially when we get to more of the ornamental sections, it really would benefit from a bit of clarity because there is a muddiness to it. Every instrument, especially when we start looking at the heavier moments, just kind of bleed into each other, and I find it difficult to really hone into the notes that are being played. It really forces me to listen to them texturally, which would normally be fine, but there's some really beautiful melodic work going on that I feel is being covered up by some of the production. And then you just take into the fact that some of these sections are pushing up to 9, 10, 11 voices, especially there at the end when we are working with like 6 or 7 guitar lines, and it just becomes this wall of sound where I really think it would work well with space. We need more space for these instruments, and it all feels very cluttered right around me, which is a very metal style of production. But I think having these many instruments, such a claustrophobic space, kind of takes away some of the beauty and elegance that the music has. And maybe that's not the specific vibe they wanted. Maybe they wanted something a bit more oppressive, in which case it works. But I would be curious to hear this if it were produced by an electronic producer, and maybe pull all the instruments out a little bit, expand the soundscape, and begin to place the instruments a little further apart from each other. Maybe not too much, because I think having that really big moment is really hingent a little bit on having that oppressiveness, that weightiness, especially there at the end, but just kind of giving them a little bit more room to breathe. It feels like all the instruments are right on top of each other in this, and it's just a bit claustrophobic for something that feels like it should be big and epic. Maybe not even an electronic producer, but somebody who's mixed and produced classical works as well. Just, someone who's used to working with many instruments, whether that's an electronic producer or somebody who's produced, orchestral works as well. Just really give all the instruments a little bit of extra space. And that kind of leads in a little bit to that final centered guitar tone, which felt like I said that the amp had a bag over it or something like that. It was very muffled, and I don't know if that was just because they really ran out of room and they tried to find some way to differentiate it from the other six guitar voices at the time, or if that's really what they wanted to be at the very top of their sound. The final piece of the puzzle is just this muffled guitar tone. It felt anticlimactic to me. And again, I don't know if that was intended or not. I really wish, I kind of really wish that whole section went for more clarity, and that's something I praised when we got down to that quieter section, was the clarity of it. I really enjoyed that. And like I said, I understand the going for a vibe. I'm not saying that my request for a more clear production would be better in any way. I would be interested in hearing what that sounds like. But again, artistic intent, maybe they wanted it like this. Also, it's 2 decade old song almost, so there's a chance that that was just, they were following the trends of the time, or maybe that's the extent of their hardware or experience. I don't know who produced this. It was distributed by Metal Blade Records. But this band also only has 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, and the song has only 4,000 views. So maybe they just didn't have the funds or resources to make a better production. Maybe they wanted something. I don't know the context around it. So I'm just giving my opinion. Anywho, let's get into the lyrics here, which are decidedly shorter than I would expect for a 17-minute song, but I guess there were a lot of instrumental sections in here. Imposture, at the peak of my triumphant march. Conjuration, doubt befalls me so close to the end. Cannot move any further, feet are tired from the haste, so close to the finale, I desperately need to rest. So right off the bat, I think it's pretty straightforward. Whatever they are trying to accomplish, they are so close to doing so. In fact, they felt that they were pretty much done, and they went for that final push. Maybe they've been running steady, but they went to get that extra bit of energy to almost force themselves back to a pace of maybe when they started this arduous task. But they can't cross that finish line. Their body needs rest. Face to face with the very substance of my journey, just need to reach out and grab the gold, take the crown, and be king for a lifetime. Yep, same idea right there. Utilizing a couple metaphors, but right there at the end, and can't quite get over the finish line. But in the hour that I longed for, at the vertex of my crave, just when I thought I had broken free, I'm even deeper inside the maze. Okay. For some reason, that made me remember the old idea that if you have the distance that anything ever moves, it will never reach its target point. Right? It's a mind or thought. What is it? A thought experiment maybe. But yeah, if you walk half the distance from one wall to the next, and then you walk half the distance between where you are to the wall, and then half the distance from where you are there to the wall, you will never ever reach the wall. You will always find ever increasingly smaller uh, distances to walk. And that's kind of what I get here, is that, all this time to get to the final, you feel, you just reach your arm out and you've got it, but there's still such a gulf between where you are and finishing and actually reaching that finish line, actually touching that wall. He even says that, I thought I was so close, but I'm actually deep inside a maze. I don't know if that's what they were going for, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of that thought experiment, but that's what it made me think of. Says, I'm deeper inside the maze, but I don't feel lost anymore. Somehow I don't feel astray. Somehow I'm not the same as before. Maybe I've grown wiser in the way. So I write this down for you to know I've been here, tired, torn, and stripped down to the core, and that I'm not the same as yesterday. Somehow I've grown wiser on the way. Thus, I write all this down for you to know I've been here close enough to almost feel your breath. Write this down for you to know I've slept the sleep of restless hours, and when I woke, I left with the promise I won't be back. Fool me, swimming in the burning sea. I have seen the careless me. And then we repeat the idea of, thus I write all this down for you to know I've been here close enough to almost feel your breath. I write this down to let you know I've slept the sleep of restless sleep, and when I woke, I left with knowing I would be back. So it almost seems that this person went on this huge task, almost got to the end, and realized, why am I doing this? What seemed to be like a worthwhile task in the beginning, at least to the narrator, was slowly rearranged, reunderstood when he said, fool me. Not fool me, but fool me. I am a fool. I've been swimming in this burning sea and I have been careless. So whatever this task wasn't one actually of worth. So much effort and energy put towards it, and it wasn't even something that should have been started. It was a worthless task. In fact, it might have even just been a task that was harming this person. A trial of pain, which reminds me a lot of Journey to the West from Slice the Cake. He says, and so I've written this down to let you know that I've been where you are before, close enough even to feel your breath. And I guess the message is, he says, I write this down for you to know that I've slept the sleep of restless hours. So sleep that doesn't do anything, right? If you're sleeping and it's restless, you're not actually getting the rest of the sleep. You're just performing the sleep itself. You're doing the job without getting any of the benefits of it. You're doing this task. You're on this big mission, but not actually gaining anything positive out of it. And I guess the message is to say, hey, you don't have to do this. I've woken up from this. I am a fool, or I realize I've been a fool. You don't have to be that same fool. Accept the wisdom that I have found on this trek, and utilize it to stop yourself from doing this worthless task as well. That's kind of what I get out of it. And I guess, yeah, I don't really know how that fits into the story. I mean, the ending, I suppose, kind of works. Like I'd mentioned, it's about just discovering this truth that could change the way that we experience life or culture or something like that. And there is something here. There is a wisdom to be gained that he wants to share with people that hopefully will help them in big ways. But I don't quite know that the wisdom that this person has gained quite matches the grandiosity I experienced in the music. But I suppose there is a lining up of the themes, even if the intensity of those themes are a bit mismatched in my experience. But yeah, it seems like a rather straightforward track there. It's interesting that this ends it's an EP. I was going to say this ends an album that's only 6 songs long, but I did see it was an album, so yeah, interesting. Those are my thoughts on Disillusion's The Sleep of Restless Hours. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this one. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything you want to add on to what I've said, or correct on anything that I said. And I had a few questions in there as well if you want to answer any of those. Above the comment section is a description box, which has a link to Linktree. Take you to this menu right here. You can pick up some merch, follow me on Twitter, join the Patreon, submit your own special selections. There's a lot of stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to look at another wild soundtrack. Wild time signature? Where is my brain today? A wild time signature track, as well as another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.